I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. He has made me glad. He has made me glad. I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. Amen. You may be seated. I'm going to give a message today that I hope will teach you something as far as something you may not have heard, and also an encouragement. So today's message is called A Third Way. Third way. Right? You never hear that, right? Remember when I was in the Army, one of the first things you hear is 3 ways to do everything. The right way, the wrong way, and the Army way. It's also translated as the right way, the wrong way, and my way. Heaven forbid you don't do the third. But seriously, there is options, and that's the thing I want to show you. But to start off the message, I want to share something humorous with you. Next slide. And I call this the Microsoft parable. You ever thought you'd ever hear a teaching off of Microsoft Windows? But there is one. Did you know that there's many ways to open a file in Windows? So I want to edit this picture here of this handsome young man. And if I know that it's in my pictures folder, I can just go there, double click on the picture, and it will automatically open in the Paint program. But what if I don't know, where that picture is? So then I can go to the Start menu, hit Start, Programs, Accessories, and Paint. Click that, and Paint will open, and I can bring it down from another menu. Yes, you're starting to get the thing. If you don't work with computers, no, it's not easy. You got to have problems. But and if you're really slick, and if you're one of the old timers, kind of like I am, but not exactly, because to me it's too hard. There's a lot of old timers that'll do this. If you know exactly where it is on the computer, you can go to the command prompt, type in the full commands and everything, and it'll open the program like that. So next slide. So you can see that the point of this silliness is there's usually more than one option in life. It's not either or. I get it on people all the time online about that. Life isn't either or. But we make it that way, don't we? And it makes things hard. And I think because the reason we think that way sometimes is we may not see the alternatives, but there are alternatives. It's just we may not see them. I love the story that Robert Schuller told one time, that a king was dying, and he told his sons, he had 3 sons, and he said, I'm going to send you all out on a quest, and you're going to bring me something back before I die. And the one who brings me back the most impressive thing will win the right to be the king. So the 3 sons went out. The oldest one went out first. And he came to this impenetrable wall of bramble bushes. Man, I can't get anywhere from there. But he looked down and he saw this really impressive stick. And he said, I can take this and I can polish it up, and this will make a great walking stick for my father. So he went back. So next brother went out. He came to the brambles and he looked at him and he goes, you know, I think I can get through there. And he worked his way through the bramble bushes and he got to the other side, and it was a flat plateau with a cliff. So I guess I'm not going any farther than that. So he looks down and he says, oh, look at this. There was a polished stone laying on the ground. He says, I'll bring this back to my father. This is a gem. I'm going to bring this back, and it'll be a good gift. Then the youngest son goes out. He comes to the bramble bushes, and he says, I think I can get through that. So he gets through that, and he comes to the plateau, and there's nothing there. And he says, whoa. And then he walks to the edge and looks down, and he sees a valley that's green, with running water, and with animals everywhere. He says, wow, that'd be a great place to put our kingdom and put our people. So he went back. He says, Father, I got nothing for you. Oh, but what I saw was terrific. And the king says to the youngest son, you are going to be the king. Because you came back with a vision. See, he had more options. He didn't let the brambles stop him. He didn't let the cliff stop him. He knew he had other options. He could go farther. So we often hear people say, I have no choice, but they do. They just haven't seen it. Now, sometimes people want to use our choices against us. Ever had that happen? They think they're going to back us into a corner by offering us two choices that both choices are negative. And that's called, in Star Trek, a no-win situation. If you're a Star Trek fan, you get that immediately. They have a test in Starfleet Academy called the Kobayashi Maru. And they put the cadets in there, and it's a computer simulation to test how they will react when they cannot win. It's rigged against them from the get-go. They cannot win. No matter what decision you make, it's going to be the wrong one. Okay? And only one person in Starfleet history has ever beaten it, and that was Captain Kirk, and that's because he snuck into the computer lab in the middle of the night and programmed it. So he cheated. But yeah, sometimes things, though, try to back us into no-win situations. Now, that's in the Bible, too. I guess people have been doing this as long as there's been people. See, the Sadducees and the Pharisees did this with Jesus. They wanted to trap him to make an answer that no matter what he said, it would offend somebody. And that's found in Matthew chapter 22. It says, then the Pharisees went and plotted how they might entangle him in his talk. And they sent to him their disciples with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God in truth, nor do you care about anyone, for you do not regard the person of men. Tell us, therefore, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But Jesus perceived their wickedness and said, why do you test me, you hypocrites? Show me the tax money. So they brought him a denarius. And he said to them, whose image and inscription is this? They said to him, Caesar's. And he said to them, render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Did they try to trap him? Some things to notice here. One is that the Pharisees wanted to trap Jesus, but they sent someone else. I think that's a riot. There might be two reasons for that. One is, those guys always wore their robes and everything walking around. So it may be that Jesus would have knew Okay, it's them guys again. They're going to try to test me. Okay, here we go. But they wanted to trick him, so they sent their students. And these people at Herodians, who were somebody completely different, so maybe Jesus will be caught off guard. And then they flattered him. I think that's interesting. They flattered him first. Hey, Master, we know that you teach the true things, and you don't have any regard for people. It's like, let's butter them up. You ever done that? You butter somebody up first because you want something. That's what they're doing. They're buttering him up, so maybe he'll let his guard down and they can get what they want. And then they sprung their trap. They asked a question that no matter what Jesus said, in their opinion, it would be wrong. See, if Jesus said, go pay the taxes, who cares? Then you got this, they could have said, you're on the side of the Romans. You're not a good Jew. If he said, don't pay the taxes, they could have, you're a revolutionary. You're against the government. So you couldn't win. But Jesus was smarter than they were. Their little flim-flam there, shenanigans. He said, give me a coin. Who's on the coin? Well, give him his coin back. That was brilliant. Give him his coin back. It's his. Give God what is his. There's a third way. Jesus did this many times throughout the Gospels. They would say, hey, think about the woman caught in the act of adultery, right? Hey, the law says that these people, she's supposed to be stoned. Well, actually, the law says that both people are supposed to be stoned. So most people they don't mention that in the movies. It's not that, when a woman is caught in adultery, they stone the woman. No, they're supposed to do the guy too. It actually says that. But so Jesus turned that all against him. He said, okay, if none of you, the first one has nothing wrong. So Jesus always found a third way to get out and around their traps. That's all it was. They were traps. And I think that's what kills me about reading the Gospels too, is none of the religious leaders really, except for 2 or 3, wanted to know that Jesus was really the Messiah. They just wanted to make him look bad. And that's true. I think that sounds familiar because we still do that today. Everybody tries to make each other look bad. It's not a matter of, is he telling the truth? Is she telling the truth? No, you make them look bad. You talk about something else, right? That's the classic online thing. Somebody will make a statement that somebody else will turn around and say, yeah, but you have ugly shoes. They don't want the truth. They just want to win. And that's what the Pharisees and the Sadducees were doing. They didn't want to accept Jesus. They just wanted to discredit him so he could get out of the way and they can do whatever they wanted to do. See, next slide. It's kind of a modern era. It's polarized, right? We're in the middle of this political campaigns. People say anything. And it's always an us versus them kind of thing. And this is why it's good to know this, is to know that there's always options. Because people try to guilt trip you on stuff. I see that a lot online too. And I see it in the newspaper. What do they say? If you're anti-abortion, you hate women. Is that true? No, if you're anti-abortion, you're anti-abortion. I mean, it doesn't mean you hate women. But so they want to narrow it down to that, because that way they win all the time. Now, I'm going to say this, and this is not popular. Christians do the same thing and the opposite. Because I've also seen from well-meaning church people that we get a lot of flack for this. People get all this negative stuff on the Facebook page. But to be pro-life, but to be pro-choice doesn't mean that you're anti-baby necessarily. And I think a lot of the pro-choice people haven't thought it through, but that's just me. But we can't say that. We can't put them in a box and say you only have one of two choices. You either like us or you're this horrible person. You're a baby killer. We shouldn't do that because that's not loving and that's not true. Doesn't mean we approve of abortion. No, it doesn't ever approve that. But there's more than one viewpoint. There's more than one choice. You don't have to do something just because somebody else says so. You're not a bad person if you have a different opinion than someone else. But those are the boxes that people want to put us in because it takes away our options in life. It takes away our choices. And that's really what it's all about. It's really all about control. Controlling the narrative, controlling how people think, controlling who gets to ultimately win the contest. But see, Jesus always preached the third one. Always. Now he also, which I think is interesting, he used this technique against the people who were trying to use it against him. I find that to be humorous. See, in Matthew chapter 21, we come across an interesting incident. Verse 23. It says, now when he came to the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people confronted him as he was teaching and said, by what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority? But Jesus answered and said to them, I also will ask you one thing, which if you tell me, I likewise will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, where was it from? From heaven or from men? And they reasoned among themselves, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say to us, then why did you not believe him? But if we say from men, we fear the multitude, for all count John as a prophet. So they answered Jesus and said, we do not know. And he said to them, well, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. That's a situation I run into a lot, believe it or not. And I have for years. Most of you know I've had my own independent ministry, and I've been an independent evangelist, and wrote books and do all this stuff. And the first question I ever get from church people is, whose authority do you have to do this? I'm like, say what? Now, God told me to do things. I mean, I don't use that phrase lightly either, because I think we do. We use that. See, if you're from the South, you get this. You ever heard the term, oh, bless your heart? Rough translation is, aren't you stupid? Really? Wow, I'm still off my vibe. Well, bless your heart. Right? We have religious versions of that too. And we got to be careful how we define our stuff. One is, God told me. Now, I want to do this. I want to have a $23 million jet. Well, God told me that I'm going to get a jet. See what I'm saying? This happens all the time. God told me, people's lives are ruined. This is a guy thing, I guess. You see a cute girl in church. God told me But back to the original story. I read a book. I read 2 books. And people were like, how dare you? Really? How dare you write a book that's not approved by us? You know, how dare you do this, that, and the other thing? And people kept saying, oh, you have to have a doctorate to do these things. Okay. I'm pliable. I'm trying to do what people say. You got to go to Bible college. So I went to Bible college. Well, that wasn't good enough. You got to have a master's degree. Okay, so I got a master's degree. Well, that wasn't good enough. But it's always the same thing, right? Well, you didn't, and it's the same thing in this situation. You know why they didn't like Jesus? And you know why they didn't like the apostles? Notice they never said this about Paul, but they only said this about the 12 apostles. Never said about whose authority. Because Jesus and the apostles did not go to their approved schools. They did not get their approved certificate to say that they are something in their system. So they didn't like that. And on top of this, Jesus is claiming something that they can't deny. Jesus is claiming to be the Messiah, which means it forces them to make a choice. Either reject him or bow down at his feet. They got a good gig going on. They didn't give that up. Right? They got the job going on, and they're making good money off of being this leader thing. And so they got to do something about these people. It's like, whose authority is this? He goes, well, let me ask you a question. I'll tell you. Jesus' question answered the question. But they didn't want to do it. They didn't want to play. See, if they said that John the Baptist was from God, that his message was from God, that would automatically mean that Jesus' message and Jesus came from God. And they didn't want to say that. So Jesus had him back there in the corner. That's why he turned around and he says, okay, I'm not going to tell you either. If you're not going to tell me, I'm not going to tell you. Because he wasn't going to play with that. But that's the thing. You can use this option thing in a bunch of ways, but sometimes God will take away all of our options. That's a rough one. Sometimes he does that to get our attention or to channel us in a way that we need to go. Next slide. See, when God takes away our options, he's telling us something. And that's a rough one to recognize sometimes, I think. Because we're not used to that, but it happens. We see this in the Bible. Genesis chapter 6. This is this chapter is right before the flood. And God looks out and says, the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, but that he also is flesh. But there'll come a time where God says, okay, I've had enough. And that's going to be a problem for us, as an individual. There's going to come a time that says, we're done. And that's what we found happen right before the flood. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him in his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. In non-King James language, God looked at all this junk and said, I'm sorry I did this. Let's fix it. They're done. And that's the thing. He made a decision. A final decision. He says, I'm not going to do this anymore. We often tell this story, and we often hear this story, and I think this comes from us trying to, either it comes from Hollywood or TV or something, or it comes from us trying to soften the blow of some of these stories. I mean, this is harsh. That's the thing about the Bible. That's what I think is cool. You know, people ask me, why do I think the Bible is true? It's because it cuts no corners. It doesn't soften anything up. It's harsh at times. You know, things are drastic, so drastic things have to be done, and that's real history. And this is one of those times. But we try to make it a little more palatable for people, and soften it up. You know? And this is one of those stories. So we often tell these stories like Noah preached to people around him. You know, it took like 100 years to build the ark. So we want to imagine Noah preaching to his neighbors saying, look, this is going to happen. You need to get into the ark. Help me, do this. But the problem is the text doesn't say that. The text says God made his mind up and that was he was done. In verse 13 of chapter 6, it says, God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. He made up his mind. And then he turns to Noah and he says, but with thee, Noah, I will establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee. So only Noah and his family was saved. That was God's plan. Everybody else, sorry. But of course, the sadder part is we don't ever hear about anybody saying, hey, wait, I want to hear this. People were so evil that even in the spite of, does that sound familiar? How many years in human history have there been churches? I mean, good, bad, or indifferent. I mean, churches have existed, right? The church has existed for 2,000 years plus. So in my mind, for anybody to say, well, I've never heard this, I don't know what this is. No. You don't have to go to us, but you can go down the street and there's somebody else. You can go down the street from there and there's somebody else. And you can go down the street and there's somebody else. People choose to not want to hear the message. They choose to not want to hear it. It's not that it's not there. It's not that it's not true. They don't want to hear it. They've got other things to do. And, the town I lived in Oklahoma, tripped me out when I first moved there because I was not ready for this. Statistically, there was a church every 1,800 feet in the city of Lawton, Oklahoma. And did you know that also statistically, there was a bar? That was the first place I ever went in my life where they had strip malls that were all bars. There was one by my house. I've been an alcoholic. I've been through. I could walk there. That's not a joke. I mean, it was 4 blocks away. There were 3 bars in a row, and each one of those, the parking lot was full from 11 o'clock in the morning every single day. I just hoped the food was good. And I don't think they were there for the food. And that was just one of many strip mall bars. They're everywhere. It just blows my mind. It says, look, we got millions of churches here. There was an equal number of bars for every church. So you're going to tell me these people don't know what the right thing to do is? Of course they do. They just didn't want to do it. They didn't want to hear it. So that was a choice they had. And God gives us that choice. Now, it's important to note that the only person who can take away your choice is the person who gave you the choice in the first place. And that's really important. I mean, it's kind of, philosophy talk there, but the only person who can give you a choice, or take away your choice rather, is the person who gives it to you in the first place. That person is God. It's not anybody else. During World War II, there was a guy, his name was Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was a Jewish guy, and he was in a concentration camp, one of the labor camps. And he realized that even in there, he had choices. And ultimately, they could degrade him, they could work him to death, they could starve him, but they could not take away his human dignity. That was his choice to have. He could give it to him, but it was his choice to keep. His attitude was his choice to keep. You have choices. And the other people, their circumstances, they can't take it away. There's a lot of stories like that came out of World War II. I don't know if you're familiar with Corrie ten Boom. She wrote a book called The Hiding Place. And they made it into a movie. And the theme through this was, there is no hole that is so deep that God is not deeper. Because their focus was on God, they had the choice, and their attitude was great. And of course, when you have a great attitude in the face of adversity, that's when people get weirded out. But people who want you not to have a good attitude, but they realize their attitudes, their sense of self-worth, their sense of dignity, they own that. They have that choice. So you have choices. But if you don't have choices, again, pay attention. Maybe God's saying something. But we won't always have choices. See, right now, God has decided to limit some of our choices. And those are choices that are spiritual. You can probably guess what the choice is. Now, the world wants to tell us that there's many ways to God. I saw a clip where Oprah actually said this. And I've heard other people say this. There's many paths to God. The world says, it doesn't matter which one you're on. That's not true, according to the Bible. It's not true. All paths don't lead to God. Some paths lead off a cliff. And God's trying to warn us on that. He has decided that there is only one way to get to Him. And that's through His Son, Jesus. Jesus said it himself, I am the truth, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to God except by me. Now that makes us make a choice. He is the only way. And He leaves us with only one option in that choice. It's His way to the highway, right? He owns both. But He is the way, the only way. So when you say choices will have consequences, you can choose Jesus, or you can choose the world. That's the choices we're given. But there's consequences to which choice. Read the paper, you'll see the result of people's kind of choices, the consequences. Now, the Bible teaches that one day, this world, the system, the dirt, everything, time cease. Just like in Noah's day, God's going to make a decision. No, so that's it. We're done. No. We actually call that day the return of Christ. It's when the earth will be recreated, and that's when there will be the final judgments. But we have a choice until that time. But when Jesus comes back, when God says time is done, there will be no more choices. Only the consequences of our choice. When Jesus comes back again, he will be the conquering king and Lord of lords. That's it. Everything's over. Game over. Which can be a good, I mean, it's a good thing. When we look, he's our Lord, and we want him to come back. People say that all the time online. Because how bad things get. And I'm like, oh, come quickly, Lord Jesus. Yes, because it'll end the evil. But it also will end the evil people because they've made the wrong choice. So what's your choice? We have to ask ourselves that. On that day, that final day, if we choose Jesus, then we'll begin eternity in the Father's kingdom with Jesus on the throne as our Lord. And it'll be a tremendous thing. You know, it's not going to be boring in heaven. Not at all. We'll be doing stuff. You already talked about that. We're going to be fixing the universe. I think that's tremendous. That's insane. But that's what's going to happen. I mean, when we can't comprehend that, we will be working for our King. And it'll be a good work environment. For the first time ever, we're going to have a good work environment. But for the person who rejects Jesus, there's judgment. That's all they got to face. They're going to be judged and then be separated from God forever. Cast into the lake of fire. How horrible is that? It's our choice. Somebody said online, they had made a meme and it said that God never chose to send anybody to hell. People chose to be separate from him. Yeah, that's sloppy theology, but you get the point. People, if they want to reject him, he decided to let him. He's got his own mind. That's the thing. What's your choice? Jesus calls down through the centuries. Who do you say I am? You have to make a choice. And like in Indiana Jones, choose wisely, because your eternity depends on it. And something to think of as we go through our lives. It's not a bad thing. I mean, God gave us a choice. He's channeling us. He's moving us, so we'll see our need for a Savior. If you'd stand with me, we'll sing our final song.